It started with a piece of paper tucked neatly into my front door. White, official looking, folded twice, and stamped with the HOA's emblem like it was a proclamation from a royal court. For a second, I thought it was another community newsletter, maybe a reminder about the annual block party. But the tone of the words inside was anything but friendly. Non-compliant landscaping, it read. The letter explained that my front yard, my sanctuary, was in violation of the neighborhood standards. According to the committee, my flower bed, a small patch of wildflowers I had nurtured for 3 years, did not meet aesthetically uniform criteria. In simpler terms, they didn't like that it wasn't the same bland green turf stretching endlessly across every other lot. They gave me 10 days to remove everything or face a $500 fine. At first, I laughed. It seemed absurd. Those flowers weren't weeds, they were my pride, my contribution to a neighborhood that looked more like a copy-paste suburb than a real place. Every spring, they burst into vibrant colors, lavender, crimson, sunny yellows, and I'd watch butterflies hover and bees hum happily. To me, that was life, something real amid all the artificial perfection. But the laughter faded quickly. There was something sharp about the wording of that letter. It wasn't a polite request. It was a demand, backed by fines and threats, as if my flowers were a crime against humanity. The next morning, as I stood on my porch with the letter in hand, I noticed her, Mrs. Patterson. She lived 2 houses down and had been on the HOA board for as long as anyone could remember. Short hair, always in pastel cardigans, the type of woman who treated the neighborhood like her personal kingdom. She was walking her little white dog, pretending not to look at me, but I could feel her eyes on my yard. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about flowers. It was about control. The HOA thrived on rules, and people like Mrs. Patterson thrived on enforcing them. They wanted conformity, every blade of grass identical, every porch a mirror of the next. My wildflowers didn't fit their picture-perfect brochure version of suburban life. For the rest of that week, I pretended to comply. I let the letter sit on my kitchen counter, glaring at me like an unpaid bill. I'd water my flowers in broad daylight, knowing someone was probably watching. Sometimes I'd even wave at Mrs. Patterson when she strolled by, her lips pressed thin as if my greeting alone was offensive. The deadline loomed closer. 10 days became 8, then 5, then 3. Another letter arrived, this time, harsher. Immediate action required, it said. They threatened legal escalation. They even mentioned community harmony, as if my patch of color was tearing the fabric of the neighborhood apart. That night, I didn't sleep much. I sat at my dining table, the letter in front of me, and thought about what to do. Remove the flowers, pay the fine, apologize like a good little neighbor and pretend it didn't bother me. No, something in me snapped. It wasn't just about flowers anymore. It was about the principle. About being told what beauty should look like, about people deciding what's acceptable on land that I paid for. About strangers thinking they had the right to bully me into submission under the banner of rules. So I made a decision. If they wanted to fight over a few flowers, I'd give them a real reason to clutch their pearls. I didn't just want to keep my garden, I wanted to turn it into something unforgettable. Something so bold, so out of their control, that they'd wish they had left me alone in the first place. The plan came together slowly at first, then all at once. I stayed up late researching, sketching, scrolling through pictures that would make any HOA board member faint on the spot. My credit card statement would look like a landscaping supply catalog exploded, but I didn't care. This wasn't just landscaping anymore. It was war. The first delivery arrived 3 days later. Several heavy crates dropped discreetly at the edge of my driveway. I saw Mrs. Patterson peeking through her blinds as the truck pulled away, her curiosity practically radiating across the street. Let her wonder. I dragged the crates inside under the cover of dusk. Each one contained a piece of the masterpiece I was about to build. Stone, wood, vibrant plants from every corner of the globe. I had ordered lighting too, the kind that could make an ordinary yard glow like a fairy tale after sunset. By the time the HOAs, final notice, showed up in my mailbox, the transformation had already begun. And trust me, when they saw what I did next, $500 would look like pocket change compared to the meltdown heading their way. The first thing I did was rip out the boring strip of grass that the HOA worshipped like some suburban idol. Each blade that came up felt like peeling away the last remnants of conformity. By dawn, my front yard was a raw, earthy canvas, ready for the chaos I had planned. Neighbors slowed their morning walks to stare. A few smiled awkwardly, others whispered like they were watching a scandal unfold in real time. And there was Mrs. Patterson, standing on her porch, phone in hand, probably texting the rest of the HOA board. He's digging up the lawn. Full defiance mode. Good. Let them talk. For the next 3 days, my property looked like a construction zone. Delivery trucks came and went, their engines humming like a declaration of independence. Bags of soil, rolls of exotic turf, planters bigger than bathtubs, even a small water feature I scored online after midnight. Every time a truck arrived, more faces pressed against blinds. But the real show began when the structure appeared. It wasn't massive, but it was bold. A handcrafted pergola stained a rich mahogany, the kind you'd see in glossy garden magazines. Underneath, I planned a seating area surrounded by cascading vines and hanging lanterns. It was elegance, not chaos, but in the HOA's eyes, it was probably a crime scene. Next came the plants, not just flowers, but a curated explosion of life. Roses in fiery reds, lilies glowing like white stars, and tropical blooms that seemed to laugh in the face of uniformity. I even planted lavender for the scent, because if I was going to make a statement, it was going to smell incredible. By the end of the week, my yard wasn't a yard anymore. It was a sanctuary, a personal oasis bursting with color and texture, layered with stone paths that wound through raised flower beds. Solar lights lined the walkway, casting a soft glow at night, while a trickling fountain whispered serenity to anyone close enough to hear. Of course, not everyone saw it that way. On the fourth day, as I adjusted a cluster of potted palms near the pergola, I felt the weight of eyes on me. Across the street, 3 HOA board members had gathered with clipboards, nodding gravely like they were inspecting a disaster zone. Their lips moved in tight whispers, pens scratching furiously against paper. I didn't wave this time. I just smiled. By Friday, the inevitable happened, an envelope thicker than the last, stamped with bold red letters, urgent action required. They accused me of multiple violations, unauthorized structural addition, non-standard vegetation, even visual disruption of neighborhood uniformity. The fine had ballooned. They threatened legal action, liens, and removal at my expense. I read every word with the fountain bubbling peacefully beside me and laughed. Not because it was funny, but because they still didn't understand. This wasn't about winning by their rules anymore. This was about rewriting the rules entirely. And then came the tipping point, Saturday afternoon. The neighborhood was alive with weekend chores, lawnmowers humming, kids on bikes, the usual symphony of suburban life. And then someone noticed the sign. I had installed it that morning, just beyond the pergola, in a discreet but visible spot. Handcrafted, carved into dark wood, with a phrase in elegant script. Wild Haven, all are welcome. That sign turned my yard from a statement into an experience. Suddenly, neighbors started stopping by, not to scold, but to admire. A young couple asked where I got my lanterns. Another family wanted to know about the fountain. Even people I had barely spoken to in years wandered over, their faces lighting up as they stepped onto the stone path and breathed in the scent of lavender. The HOA saw this, too. From her porch, Mrs. Patterson watched in horror as the very harmony she claimed to protect bloomed in my yard, not in neat, soulless rows, but in vibrant, living color. By sunset, I counted at least 15 neighbors who had lingered by the pergola, chatting, laughing, and snapping photos. My phone buzzed non-stop with messages. Your yard is amazing. Can we come by tomorrow? Do you do design work? And just like that, the power shifted. The HOA wanted control, but now the neighborhood was on my side. They could write all the letters they wanted, their authority was wilting faster than their perfectly trimmed shrubs. As twilight deepened, lanterns cast a golden glow across the garden, and soft music drifted from a hidden speaker. My yard wasn't just defiance anymore, it was the heart of the neighborhood, whether the HOA liked it or not. But I knew they weren't done. HOAs don't surrender quietly. They'd escalate. They'd dig for bylaws, loop in lawyers, maybe even show up in person to inspect my property. And that was fine, because I wasn't finished, either. If they thought this garden was bold, wait until they saw what I had planned next. Sunday morning started quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that comes before a storm. The neighborhood usually buzzed with the sound of sprinklers and leaf blowers, but today, all I heard was the soft rustle of leaves in my garden oasis. Then I saw them, a convoy of sedans rolling slowly down the street like a suburban parade. 3 cars, polished and gleaming in the early light, each one packed with self-importance. They parked in front of my house, engines cutting out in perfect unison. The HOA board had arrived. 4 members stepped out, clipboards clutched like weapons, and at their center was Mrs. Patterson. Her pastel cardigan was buttoned tight, her jaw set like marble. Behind her, the others fanned out, scanning my property with expressions that could curdle milk. I didn't greet them. I didn't need to. They marched up my driveway, their sensible shoes crunching against the new stone path I had laid with my own hands. Every step they took was framed by cascading blooms and the gentle trickle of the fountain. Beauty on all sides, and they looked like they were walking into a war zone. I stayed on the porch, arms crossed, watching as they circled like hawks. They scribbled notes, snapped photos, pointed at the pergola, the lanterns, the handcrafted sign. I could practically hear the finds multiplying in their heads. Finally, Mrs. Patterson stopped at the edge of the walkway, staring at me like I had personally declared war on the neighborhood. Maybe I had. She raised her clipboard and tapped it once, as if to punctuate the authority she believed she wielded. I didn't move. I didn't speak. Because here's the thing. By now, I didn't need to. One by one, doors started opening across the street. Neighbors stepped out, coffee mugs in hand, curious eyes drawn by the HOA spectacle. The young couple who had complimented my lanterns stood at the curb. The family with kids waved from their driveway. Even Mr. Thompson, the guy who hadn't spoken to anyone in years, wandered over, grinning. And then it happened. Beautiful garden. Someone called out. The words hung in the air like a spark, and suddenly, voices joined in. Compliments, questions, laughter. People stepped off their lawns and onto my path, weaving past the wall like they didn't exist. A mother crouched to let her toddler dip tiny fingers in the fountain. 2 teenagers posed for photos under the pergola. My yard wasn't just alive, it was a community hub, a living rebellion blooming in full view. Mrs. Patterson's lips tightened so hard they turned white. She looked from the crowd to me and back again, realizing what this meant. The HOA thrived on unity, but right now, the unity was against them. One neighbor, Mr. Daniels from 3 houses down, spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. You should be thanking him. This is the nicest yard in the neighborhood. The board members froze. Their authority was slipping through their fingers like water. Every camera phone pointed their way was a reminder, this wasn't a private scolding. This was public, and they were losing. Mrs. Patterson muttered something to the others. They huddled, whispered, their shoulders stiff with quiet panic. Finally, without another word, they retreated, clipboards clutched like shields, shoes clicking briskly on the pavement as they retreated to their cars. The sedans rolled away, engines purring like embarrassed cats. And just like that, the silence broke, not with conflict, but with laughter, chatter, the warm hum of a neighborhood alive in a way it hadn't been in years. People lingered in my yard all afternoon, swapping stories, asking for gardening tips, snapping photos under the glow of lantern light as evening fell. By nightfall, a message appeared in my inbox. Subject: HOA meeting update. Body: the board has decided to re-evaluate certain landscaping guidelines. Further communication will follow. Translation: you win, for now. But this wasn't about winning anymore. It was about freedom, about proving that individuality could bloom even in the most rigid corners of suburbia. My garden wasn't just a yard anymore. It was a statement, a sanctuary, a symbol. And as I sat under the pergola that night, warm light flickering through the vines, fountain whispering softly at my side, I realized something. They could write their rules. They could wave their clipboards. But as long as these flowers grew, wild, unapologetic, unstoppable, this was my home. And no law on earth could take that away.